I sat in TechFlow's gleaming conference room as Marcus Sterling, the founder's son, smugly announced the cancellation of all employee stock options before our $350 million acquisition closing. 24 years old and the company's lead software architect, I nodded silently while my heart pounded against my ribs. 4 years of tireless work believing in this company's mission, trusting in promises of shared success. As Meridian Industries' legal counsel reviewed the final documents, he suddenly froze mid-sentence. His pen stopped moving. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Wait, the capitalization table shows a majority shareholder who isn't present in this room. His sharp eyes scanned our faces methodically. Marcus went chalk white. Nobody in that room knew I had inherited 51% ownership from my late mentor, Dr. Eleanor Whitman. 4 years earlier, I had walked into TechFlow's modest Austin office as Laura Martinez, a fresh computer science graduate from the University of Texas, with calloused hands from coding through countless all-nighters and a head full of algorithmic innovations. The company occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in the tech corridor, buzzing with the electric energy of a startup that believed it could change the world through revolutionary data processing software. Dr. Eleanor Whitman spotted me during my first week. While other senior engineers dismissed the new graduates as coffee-fetching interns, Eleanor saw something different in my approach to complex problems. She was TechFlow's co-founder and chief technology officer, a brilliant woman in her 50s who had built her reputation by turning theoretical computer science into practical solutions that Fortune 500 companies paid millions to implement. Your algorithm for parallel data compression is mathematically elegant, Eleanor told me during our first one-on-one meeting. Her corner office overlooked the Colorado River, and she kept a collection of vintage computing books alongside modern technical journals. But more importantly, you understand that technology serves people, not the other way around. Eleanor became more than my supervisor. She became my mentor, my guide through the labyrinthine world of enterprise software development and corporate strategy. During late-night debugging sessions, she taught me that writing clean code was just the beginning. Understanding market dynamics, building strategic partnerships, and maintaining ethical leadership were equally crucial for creating lasting technological impact. The most dangerous person in any company, Eleanor once warned me while we reviewed quarterly reports, is someone who confuses authority with competence. They make decisions based on ego rather than evidence, and they destroy everything principled people work to build. I should have recognized the foreshadowing in her words. Marcus Sterling represented everything Eleanor cautioned against. As the founder's son, he possessed unearned authority, but demonstrated consistently poor judgment. He spent company money on luxury office renovations while delaying employee salary reviews. He hired expensive consultants who produced glossy presentations with no actionable insights. Most frustratingly, he treated dedicated employees like disposable resources, while positioning himself as the visionary leader driving TechFlow's success. Eleanor and Marcus clashed frequently during board meetings. She advocated for reinvesting profits into research and development, expanding the engineering team, and creating meaningful equity participation for employees who contributed to the company's growth. Marcus pushed for aggressive cost-cutting measures, outsourcing development to cheaper overseas contractors, and maximizing short-term profits to attract acquisition offers. Laura has developed 3 of our most commercially successful algorithms, Eleanor argued during one particularly heated board discussion. She deserves senior engineer status and appropriate stock option allocation. We're a family here, Marcus replied with his characteristic condescending smile. Everyone contributes according to their experience level. Premature promotions create unrealistic expectations. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she maintained professional composure. Later in private, she expressed her growing concern about Marcus's influence over company direction. 18 months ago, Eleanor died in a car accident on Highway 35 during an ice storm. The entire company grieved her loss, but Marcus wasted no time consolidating power. Within weeks, he had maneuvered himself into the chief technology officer role, despite lacking Eleanor's technical expertise or strategic vision. Now, sitting in this acquisition meeting, I watched Marcus's face drain of color as I stood up slowly and spoke with quiet confidence. I am Eleanor Whitman's legal heir and the majority shareholder of TechFlow Industries. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. James Morrison, Meridian Industries legal counsel, straightened in his chair and reached for his briefcase. Dr. Whitman established a private trust before her death. I continued, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. She left me 51% of her TechFlow shares, along with detailed instructions for protecting the company's mission and its employees. Sandra Hayes, TechFlow's current CEO, and Marcus's carefully chosen puppet shuffled through papers frantically. That's impossible. All share distributions were handled through the estate. Marcus inherited Eleanor's voting rights. I pulled out a sealed envelope that had been sitting in my desk drawer for 18 months, waiting for exactly this moment. Eleanor had given it to me 3 weeks before her death, along with cryptic instructions about opening it only when the company's integrity was threatened. Eleanor anticipated potential conflicts of interest, I said, breaking the wax seal. She documented her share distribution through a separate legal entity that bypassed the standard estate process. Marcus found his voice, though it cracked with desperation. This is ridiculous. You're a junior employee. You can't just claim ownership of a company. James Morrison cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Mr. Sterling, if these documents are authentic, we need to halt this acquisition immediately until ownership can be verified through proper legal channels. The transformation in the room's dynamics was immediate and electric. Sandra Hayes, who had spent the morning treating me like an irrelevant observer, suddenly looked at me with a mixture of fear and calculation. The Meridian Industries team huddled together, whispering urgently about due diligence failures and legal liability. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished concrete floor. This is sabotage. Eleanor never mentioned any trust arrangement. Laura is trying to extort money from this deal. But I had learned patience from Eleanor. I had learned to let facts speak louder than emotions. Mr. Morrison, I said, turning to address the acquisition counsel directly, I respectfully request that you verify these documents through TechFlow's original incorporation attorneys at Brennan, Walsh, and Associates. They handled Eleanor's estate planning and can confirm the trust's legitimacy within 24 hours. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different energy. Not confusion, but anticipation. The balance of power had shifted and everyone present could feel it. Marcus's empire was beginning to crack. The next morning brought legal verification that sent shockwaves through TechFlow's executive suite. Brennan Walsh and Associates confirmed that Eleanor's trust arrangement was not only legitimate, but meticulously documented according to Texas corporate law. My 51% ownership was ironclad and immediate. As the majority shareholder, I exercised my right to demand complete access to all company financial records, board meeting minutes, and executive compensation details. Marcus tried every delay tactic imaginable, claiming that sensitive documents required proper organization and that immediate disclosure might violate client confidentiality agreements. His desperation raised red flags that I couldn't ignore. I want a forensic accounting audit, I announced during an emergency board meeting that afternoon. Every transaction, every expense report, every consulting contract from the past 3 years needs independent verification. Marcus's face went ashen. That's completely unnecessary. Our books are audited annually by Henderson and Associates. Then you should welcome independent verification, I replied calmly. Unless there's something you're afraid we might discover. Sandra Hayes fidgeted with her pen, avoiding eye contact. David Rodriguez, TechFlow's chief financial officer, looked genuinely puzzled by Marcus's resistance. Actually, Marcus, a forensic audit might help us identify cost-saving opportunities for the new ownership structure. Within 48 hours, Patricia Chen from Morrison Forensic Accounting began her systematic examination of TechFlow's financial records. Patricia was a former FBI financial crimes investigator who had built her reputation exposing corporate fraud at companies across Texas. Her methodical approach and attention to detail were legendary in Austin's business community. The preliminary findings arrived on a Thursday afternoon that changed everything. Patricia knocked on my office door at 4:30, carrying a thick folder and wearing the grim expression of someone who had uncovered something terrible. "Laura, we need to talk privately. What I've found is going to devastate this company's leadership." We moved to the small conference room adjacent to my office, and Patricia spread documents across the table with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. Marcus Sterling has been systematically embezzling funds for over 3 years. She began without preamble. He established 6 shell companies with names similar to legitimate consulting firms and approved payments totaling $7.8 million for services that were never rendered. The papers in front of me told a story of calculated deception. Invoices from Strategic Business Solutions that provided no documentation of actual work performed. Payments to Technology Integration Associates for software licenses that didn't exist. Consulting fees to Market Research Dynamics for reports that were never delivered. Every payment was approved through Marcus's executive authority, Patricia continued. He created false board resolutions authorizing these expenditures and forged signatures from other board members who never saw the actual documents. But the financial theft was only part of Marcus's betrayal. The audit revealed that while telling employees there was no budget for salary increases or meaningful stock option grants, Marcus had been paying himself an annual salary of $2 million, plus bonuses that brought his total compensation to nearly $3 million per year. "Look at this comparison," Patricia said, sliding another document toward me. Eleanor's final salary was $400,000 annually. Marcus increased his compensation by 600% while freezing everyone else's wages. The evidence was overwhelming and sickening. Purchase orders for luxury office furniture charged to employee wellness initiatives. Company credit card expenses for personal vacations labeled as client development trips. Even the expensive espresso machine in the executive kitchen had been purchased through a fake consulting contract. My hands shook as I reviewed the documentation. This wasn't simple greed. This was a systematic assault on everything Eleanor had built, every principle she had instilled in TechFlow's culture. "There's more," Patricia said quietly. "Marcus established offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands where he's been transferring funds through cryptocurrency transactions. He's been preparing to disappear with company assets if this acquisition didn't go through." The betrayal cut deeper than financial theft. Marcus had been planning to abandon TechFlow and its employees while positioning himself as their devoted leader. He had manipulated board meetings, falsified financial reports, and deceived investors while stealing the resources that should have funded research development and fair compensation for the people who actually built the company's success. David Rodriguez arrived at my office an hour later, summoned by my urgent request. His face reflected genuine shock as Patricia walked him through the forensic findings. "I had no idea," David said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Marcus always provided board-approved documentation for these expenditures. I trusted the authorization process." "That's exactly what he counted on," Patricia replied. "He exploited the trust and respect that Eleanor built into this company's culture." Lisa Thompson from Human Resources joined us as the scope of Marcus's deception became clear. Employees had been denied raises and promotions while being told the company was struggling financially. Meanwhile, Marcus had stolen enough money to fund substantial pay increases for every single employee. "People have been working second jobs to make ends meet," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. "Jennifer from accounting has been driving for a rideshare company on weekends. Tom from development has been tutoring high school students for extra income. They believed in this company's mission, and Marcus stole their future." The human cost of Marcus's crimes was staggering. Talented engineers had left TechFlow for better paying positions elsewhere, believing the company couldn't afford competitive compensation. Promising projects had been canceled due to budget constraints, while Marcus diverted funds to his personal accounts. Eleanor had built TechFlow on principles of integrity, innovation, and shared success. Marcus had perverted those principles into a vehicle for personal enrichment at the expense of everyone who trusted him. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Patricia continued uncovering additional evidence of fraud: fake vendor contracts, manipulated expense reports, forged board meeting minutes that authorized expenditures the board had never actually discussed. This level of systematic fraud typically indicates longer-term planning, Patricia observed. Marcus didn't stumble into these crimes. He designed them deliberately to maximize his personal gain while minimizing detection risk. The devastating realization hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just stolen money, he had stolen years of hard work, innovation, and dedication from everyone who believed in Eleanor's vision. He had betrayed the trust of employees who had sacrificed personal opportunities to build something meaningful. But as I sat surrounded by evidence of Marcus's crimes, I felt something unexpected rising within me. Not just anger or sadness, but determination. Eleanor had prepared me for leadership, and this moment demanded everything she had taught me about courage, integrity, and fighting for what was right. Marcus had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the quiet woman in the corner who had been watching, learning, and preparing for exactly this confrontation. His empire of lies was about to collapse. Marcus's counterattack began the following Monday morning with the ruthless desperation of a cornered predator. Rather than accepting responsibility for his crimes or attempting to negotiate some form of settlement, he launched an all-out assault designed to destroy my credibility and invalidate Eleanor's legacy. His first weapon was a carefully orchestrated media campaign. By 9 a.m., local business reporters were receiving anonymous tips about irregularities in Eleanor's estate planning and suspicious timing regarding my inheritance claim. Marcus had hired Brennan Communications, Austin's most aggressive public relations firm, to plant stories suggesting I was an opportunistic employee attempting to exploit a tragic accident for personal gain. Young TechFlow engineer claims majority ownership after mentor's death, read the headline in Austin Business Weekly. The article, clearly based on information provided by Marcus's team, painted me as an inexperienced graduate student who had manipulated a grieving widow into signing fraudulent documents. But Marcus's most devastating attack came in the form of forged documents that he presented to TechFlow's board during an emergency meeting I wasn't invited to attend. He produced what appeared to be Eleanor's personal financial records, showing unexplained deposits totaling nearly $2 million in the months before her death. Eleanor Whitman was embezzling funds from this company, Marcus announced to the shocked board members. She created this fake inheritance trust to cover her tracks and recruited Laura as an unwitting accomplice. Sandra Hayes, ever eager to support Marcus's narrative, added her own interpretation. It makes sense now. Eleanor always opposed our cost-cutting measures because she was stealing the money herself. The inheritance is just Laura's way of legitimizing stolen assets. The forged documents were sophisticated enough to fool casual inspection. Bank statements showed large cash deposits. Investment account records indicated suspicious trading activity. Even Eleanor's personal tax returns appeared to show unreported income that matched the alleged embezzlement timeline. Marcus had spent months preparing this character assassination, hiring forensic document specialists to create convincing forgeries and private investigators to develop a plausible narrative of Eleanor's supposed corruption. The level of premeditation was staggering and terrifying. Thomas Brennan, the corrupt private investigator Marcus had employed, delivered additional manufactured evidence during a tense board meeting that afternoon. Phone records allegedly showing Eleanor communicating with offshore banking representatives. Travel receipts supposedly documenting trips to the Cayman Islands for secret account management. even photographs that appeared to show Eleanor meeting with suspicious financial advisors. Ms. Martinez has been manipulated by a master criminal, Brennan announced with theatrical gravity. Dr. Whitman spent over a year planning this elaborate scheme to steal from the company she helped build. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Board members who had respected Eleanor for decades began questioning their memories and judgments. Employees who had mourned her death started whispering about possible deception. Even David Rodriguez, despite knowing the forensic audit results, appeared shaken by the apparent evidence of Eleanor's misconduct. Marcus's strategy was diabolically clever. By attacking Eleanor's character posthumously, he could undermine the legitimacy of my inheritance while positioning himself as the victim of an elaborate fraud scheme. Dead people can't defend themselves, and Marcus exploited that vulnerability with calculated cruelty. But the personal attacks escalated beyond character assassination into direct threats against my safety and freedom. Marcus hired aggressive lawyers who filed injunctions to freeze all company assets pending fraud investigation. They threatened criminal charges for conspiracy forgery and attempted extortion. They even suggested I could face federal prosecution for mail fraud and wire fraud related to the inheritance claims. Miss Martinez, said William Hayes, Marcus's lead attorney and Sandra's husband, "You're facing potential decades in federal prison. Your best option is to withdraw these fraudulent claims and accept a modest severance package." The pressure was overwhelming and relentless. Private investigators followed me to and from work. Process servers appeared at my apartment at all hours delivering subpoenas and court documents. Anonymous phone calls threatened legal action if I didn't stop this charade immediately. Marcus even approached Eleanor's family members with his poisonous narrative. He contacted Eleanor's sister Rachel in Dallas, offering $50,000 for her cooperation in contesting the inheritance. He reached out to Eleanor's elderly parents in Houston, suggesting that I had taken advantage of their daughter's kindness and manipulated her into fraudulent estate planning. Eleanor was always too trusting, Rachel told me during a painful phone conversation. Maybe Marcus is right about this inheritance situation. It does seem suspicious that she never mentioned anything about majority ownership. The isolation was crushing. Colleagues who had worked alongside me for years began treating me with suspicion and distance. Some genuinely believed Marcus's lies about Eleanor's supposed corruption. Others simply wanted to avoid being associated with what appeared to be an explosive scandal that could destroy their careers. Even worse, the acquisition deal was rapidly falling apart. James Morrison informed both sides that Meridian Industries was withdrawing their offer pending resolution of the ownership dispute and fraud allegations. 3 years of careful negotiations and strategic planning were evaporating because of Marcus's criminal desperation. "We can't purchase a company with unclear ownership structure and pending federal investigation," Morrison explained during a conference call. Meridian's board has voted to terminate acquisition discussions until these issues are resolved through proper legal channels. That night, sitting alone in my apartment with legal documents scattered across my kitchen table, I faced the darkest moment of my adult life. Marcus's web of deception was so comprehensive and convincing that even I began questioning my own memories and perceptions. Had Eleanor really trusted me with majority ownership? Were the documents I possessed genuine? Could I be wrong about Marcus's guilt despite the overwhelming forensic evidence? But then I remembered Eleanor's final words to me spoken during our last conversation 3 weeks before her death. We had been reviewing code for TechFlow's latest algorithm when she suddenly stopped typing and looked at me with unusual intensity. "Laura, promise me something. If anything ever happens to me, don't let Marcus destroy what we've built. The truth has a way of emerging, but only if someone is brave enough to fight for it." At the time, I had dismissed her words as general concern about succession planning. Now I understood they were a specific warning about the battle I would face. Eleanor had known Marcus would attempt exactly this kind of character assassination. She had prepared for his lies, his forgeries, and his attempts to rewrite history. Most importantly, she had prepared me to withstand his attacks and fight back with truth and evidence. The federal investigation that Marcus had threatened was indeed coming, but it wouldn't be targeting me. FBI agent Sarah Collins contacted me the next morning with information that would shatter Marcus's carefully constructed lies and expose the true scope of his criminal enterprise. The web of deception was about to collapse on its creator. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source that Marcus had never considered in his elaborate deception scheme. Eleanor hadn't just been a brilliant technologist and ethical leader, she had also been a meticulous documentarian who understood the importance of preserving evidence against future challenges. During our final conversation, Eleanor had mentioned something about keeping the truth safe in the cloud. I had assumed she was speaking metaphorically about data backup procedures. But sitting in my apartment at 2 a.m., surrounded by Marcus's forged documents and legal threats, I remembered her exact words with startling clarity. The truth has a way of emerging, but only if someone knows where to look for it, Eleanor had said while gesturing toward her computer screen. I've learned that the most important information often lives in places that seem insignificant to people who don't understand technology. Following Eleanor's digital breadcrumbs led me to a secure cloud storage account that she had established using encryption protocols far more sophisticated than TechFlow's standard business systems. The account required biometric authentication that she had programmed to accept my fingerprint, a detail that now seemed prophetic rather than convenient. What I discovered inside that encrypted vault was breathtaking in its scope and devastating in its implications for Marcus's criminal enterprise. Eleanor had been conducting her own investigation into Marcus's activities for over 15 months before her death. She had documented every suspicious transaction, every forged board resolution, and every piece of evidence that proved Marcus's systematic embezzlement. But more than that, she had anticipated his likely response to discovery and prepared countermeasures for his expected attacks. The vault contained high-definition audio recordings of Marcus discussing his theft schemes with conspirators, video footage of him accessing company accounts outside normal business hours, photographs of documents that proved his board meeting minutes were fabricated after the fact. Even GPS data showing his visits to offshore banking facilities during supposed business trips. Michael Torres, the cybersecurity expert Eleanor had secretly hired to help document Marcus's crimes, had installed monitoring software that captured every digital action Marcus took on company systems. Email communications with shell company representatives, file transfers to personal storage devices, financial transactions that clearly showed the movement of company funds to Marcus's personal accounts. Eleanor contacted me 18 months ago with concerns about unauthorized access to company financial systems, Michael explained when I called him that morning. She suspected internal fraud but wanted comprehensive evidence before making accusations. What we discovered was far worse than she initially imagined. The audio recordings were particularly damning. Marcus's voice was clearly identifiable as he bragged to Thomas Brennan about manipulating board meetings and creating fake vendor relationships. "These idiots actually believe I'm a visionary leader," Marcus laughed during one recorded conversation. Eleanor was the only one smart enough to ask difficult questions, and once she's out of the picture, I'll have complete control over the company's direction. Another recording captured Marcus discussing his plans to frame Eleanor posthumously if his crimes were discovered. "If anyone gets close to exposing the embezzlement, we'll plant evidence that Eleanor was stealing the money herself," Marcus told Brennan. "Dead people can't defend themselves, and everyone will assume the quiet girl inherited dirty money." But the most shocking revelation came from encrypted emails that Marcus had exchanged with Sandra Hayes. Their correspondence revealed that Sandra wasn't just an unknowing puppet. She was an active participant in the fraud scheme, receiving kickbacks for approving fraudulent expenditures and helping Marcus manipulate board meetings. "Your husband's law firm has been very helpful in creating legal cover for our consulting arrangements," Marcus wrote to Sandra. The additional compensation we discussed should appear in your account by Friday. William Hayes, Sandra's husband and Marcus's attorney, had been instrumental in establishing the shell companies and creating false documentation for the embezzled funds. The corruption network extended far beyond Marcus's individual crimes into a conspiracy involving multiple TechFlow executives and external collaborators. Eleanor had also prepared a detailed forensic analysis that contradicted every element of Marcus's forged evidence against her. Bank records showing that her personal deposits came from legitimate consulting work for other technology companies. Investment account documentation proving that her trading activity was transparent and properly reported. Tax returns that accurately reflected all her income sources and matched her actual financial transactions. Eleanor knew Marcus would try to destroy her reputation, Michael explained. She spent months creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that would expose his lies while protecting her own integrity. The vault even contained video testimony that Eleanor had recorded shortly before her death, anticipating the possibility that she might not survive to present the evidence herself. If you're watching this, Laura, it means that Marcus has begun his counterattack, and I'm no longer able to defend myself or the company we've built together, Eleanor said from the screen. Her voice was calm but determined, the same tone she had used during our most challenging technical discussions. Everything you need to destroy Marcus's lies and expose his crimes is contained in this vault. But more importantly, you have the strength and integrity to lead TechFlow according to the principles we've always shared. Don't let his corruption poison your faith in what we've accomplished. Armed with Eleanor's evidence, I contacted FBI agent Sarah Collins, who had been investigating financial crimes in Austin's technology sector. Sarah was a former corporate fraud specialist who had built her reputation pursuing white-collar criminals who exploited startup company vulnerabilities. What you've shown me represents one of the most comprehensive fraud schemes I've encountered, Sarah told me during our initial meeting. Marcus Sterling didn't just steal money, he created an entire criminal enterprise designed to exploit trust and manipulate legal systems. The federal investigation expanded rapidly as Sarah's team reviewed Eleanor's documentation. Additional search warrants revealed evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy charges that could result in decades of federal prison time for Marcus and his collaborators. But perhaps most satisfying was the moment when James Morrison called to inform me that Meridian Industries wanted to resume acquisition discussions based on the new evidence. Our board has reviewed the FBI's preliminary findings, Morrison said. We're prepared to move forward with the acquisition under your leadership, assuming Marcus Sterling and his associates are removed from all company positions immediately. The transformation in workplace dynamics was immediate and electric. Employees who had been demoralized by years of financial manipulation suddenly understood that their dedication and hard work had been systematically exploited by criminals. Rather than feeling discouraged, they rallied around the opportunity to rebuild TechFlow according to Eleanor's original vision. David Rodriguez approached me with a mixture of relief and determination. I should have questioned those consulting contracts more aggressively. Eleanor tried to warn me about irregularities, but I trusted Marcus's explanations. I want to help rebuild this company's financial integrity. Even Lisa Thompson expressed renewed optimism about TechFlow's future. People have been so frustrated believing the company couldn't afford fair compensation. Now they understand that their hard work was generating profits that Marcus stole. They're excited about participating in honest success. Eleanor's evidence vault had provided more than just legal ammunition against Marcus's criminal enterprise. It had restored faith in the possibility that ethical leadership and principled business practices could prevail against corruption and deception. The counteroffensive was just beginning, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Marcus's web of lies was unraveling and justice was finally within reach. The momentum shift following Eleanor's evidence revelation created opportunities for strategic partnerships that Marcus had never anticipated. Rather than fighting a desperate defensive battle against his lies and forgeries, I found myself building a coalition of allies united by shared interest in exposing corruption and protecting legitimate business practices. Victoria Chang, Meridian Industries' chief executive officer, emerged as an unexpected but crucial partner in the effort to restructure TechFlow's leadership. Victoria had built her reputation through aggressive pursuit of technology acquisitions that created value for both buyers and target company employees. Marcus's fraud scheme threatened to destroy exactly the kind of ethical business culture that Meridian sought to preserve and expand. We've been investigating Marcus independently since the acquisition negotiations began, Victoria revealed during a private conference call. His financial projections never aligned with TechFlow's actual operational capacity, and his resistance to standard due diligence procedures raised multiple red flags. Meridian's internal investigation had uncovered evidence of Marcus's criminal activity through entirely separate channels from Eleanor's documentation. Their forensic accountants had identified suspicious expense patterns. Their legal team had discovered irregularities in TechFlow's board meeting documentation. Their technology auditors had found unauthorized access to company systems that violated standard cybersecurity protocols. The acquisition makes strategic sense for both companies, Victoria continued, but only under leadership that shares our commitment to transparency, innovation, and ethical business practices. Your ownership position and Eleanor's legacy provide exactly the foundation we need for successful integration. Together, we developed a comprehensive strategy for removing Marcus while preserving the acquisition's value and protecting all legitimate employees and shareholders. Gregory Walsh, Meridian's corporate restructuring specialist, outlined a legal framework that would force Marcus out while maintaining business continuity. Federal fraud charges create automatic grounds for termination and forfeiture of any ill-gotten compensation, Gregory explained. State corporate law allows immediate removal of executives who breach fiduciary duties. Combined with the forensic evidence, we can eliminate Marcus's influence within 30 days. Jennifer Adams, an employment law attorney specializing in executive misconduct, helped develop protection strategies for employees who might face retaliation from Marcus's remaining allies within TechFlow. Her approach balanced aggressive pursuit of justice with practical concern for people who depended on company employment for their livelihoods. Corporate fraud cases often create collateral damage for innocent employees, Jennifer observed. Our priority is ensuring that Marcus's crimes don't destroy opportunities for people who contributed to TechFlow's legitimate success. The Alliance Network expanded to include unexpected support from Robert Sterling, TechFlow's original founder and Marcus's father. Robert had built the company's initial reputation through decades of honest engineering work and principled business relationships. Learning about his son's criminal betrayal devastated him personally, but strengthened his resolve to protect the company's integrity. I taught Marcus that business success comes from creating value for customers and treating employees fairly, Robert told me during a painful but necessary conversation. Instead, he perverted everything I built into a vehicle for personal greed. I support whatever legal action is necessary to restore this company's ethical foundation. Robert's public support for my leadership eliminated any remaining questions about legitimacy or family loyalty conflicts. His statement to the board of directors carried weight that no amount of Marcus's manipulation could overcome. Eleanor Whitman was the most ethical business partner I ever worked with, Robert declared during an emergency board meeting. Her choice of Laura as heir reflects the same principled judgment that made TechFlow successful. I fully endorse Laura's leadership and demand Marcus's immediate removal from all company positions. Even more significant was the support that emerged from TechFlow's employee base as they learned the truth about Marcus's theft and Eleanor's integrity. Kelly Barnes, Marcus's former executive assistant, provided additional evidence that had been hidden from Eleanor's investigation. Marcus made me delete emails and shred documents that he claimed were confidential business communications, Kelly explained to FBI investigators. I kept copies of everything because something felt wrong about his instructions. Now I understand he was destroying evidence of his crimes. The employee testimonials painted a clear picture of Marcus's abusive leadership style and systematic manipulation of honest people who trusted his authority. Stories emerged of qualified employees being denied promotions while Marcus hired expensive external consultants for work that could have been done internally. Project budgets being cut arbitrarily while Marcus approved lavish spending on office renovations and executive perks. People were working weekends without overtime pay because Marcus convinced us the company was struggling financially, explained Tom Richardson from the development team. Meanwhile, he was stealing millions of dollars that should have funded fair compensation and career advancement opportunities. The narrative that emerged from employee interviews directly contradicted Marcus's attempts to portray himself as a visionary leader focused on company growth and employee welfare. Instead, it revealed a pattern of exploitation, manipulation, and systematic theft that had persisted for years, while Eleanor worked to protect the company's ethical culture. Patricia Chen's forensic accounting audit provided the final pieces of evidence needed to quantify the full scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise. Her report documented not just the $7.8 million in direct embezzlement, but additional costs from productivity losses, employee turnover, and missed business opportunities caused by his mismanagement. Marcus's crimes cost TechFlow approximately $15 million in total economic impact, Patricia concluded. The company could have doubled its workforce, expanded into new markets, and increased employee compensation significantly if these resources had been invested properly instead of stolen. But the Alliance Network's most powerful asset was the moral authority that came from fighting for principles rather than personal gain. Unlike Marcus's desperate attempt to preserve his criminal enterprise through lies and manipulation, our coalition was united by shared commitment to truth, justice, and ethical business practices. Media coverage began shifting as reporters gained access to actual evidence rather than Marcus's manufactured stories. Amanda Foster, an investigative journalist with Austin Business Chronicle, wrote a comprehensive expose that detailed the full scope of the fraud scheme and its impact on both TechFlow and Austin's broader technology community. The Sterling fraud case represents a cautionary tale about the importance of corporate governance and ethical leadership, Amanda wrote, but it also demonstrates that principled individuals can successfully challenge corruption when they have courage to fight for what's right. The article's impact was immediate and widespread. Other technology companies began reviewing their own internal controls and executive oversight procedures. Investors started demanding more comprehensive due diligence processes for acquisition targets. Even regulatory agencies began examining whether existing fraud detection systems were adequate for preventing similar schemes. As the week progressed, Marcus's isolation became increasingly complete. His remaining allies either abandoned him when confronted with evidence of his crimes or were revealed as active participants in the fraud conspiracy. His legal team withdrew from representation when it became clear that defending his actions would require them to present false evidence and perjured testimony. The alliance we had built around Eleanor's principles and evidence was proving stronger than Marcus's network of corruption and deception. Justice was not just possible, but inevitable. The final confrontation was approaching, and Marcus's desperation was about to drive him to one last catastrophic mistake. Marcus's final desperate maneuver revealed the true depth of his narcissism and complete disregard for everyone whose lives he had manipulated and damaged. Faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes, federal charges that could result in decades of imprisonment and total isolation from former allies, he chose scorched earth destruction rather than accepting responsibility for his actions. His plan was diabolically simple and devastatingly cruel. If he couldn't maintain control of TechFlow, he would destroy the company's value entirely, ensuring that employees who had dedicated years to building the business would lose everything along with him. Marcus approached Jonathan Webb, Chief Executive Officer of Apex Technologies TechFlow's primary competitor in the data processing market. Apex had spent years trying to acquire TechFlow's proprietary algorithms and client relationships through legitimate business competition. Now, Marcus offered them a different opportunity: immediate purchase of his remaining shares at a deeply discounted price that would give Apex enough ownership to disrupt the Meridian acquisition and dismantle TechFlow's operations. Think of it as corporate warfare, Marcus told Webb during a secretly recorded conversation that federal investigators obtained through wiretap authorization. I sell you my stake for 50 million instead of the 100 million it's actually worth. You use that ownership position to vote against the Meridian deal and strip TechFlow's assets for your own operations. The scheme would have been devastating for everyone except Marcus and Apex. Employees would lose their jobs when TechFlow's operations were absorbed into Apex's existing structure. Legitimate shareholders would see their investments destroyed. Clients would face service disruptions and potential data security compromises. The Austin technology community would lose one of its most innovative companies. But Marcus had made one critical miscalculation that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the legal and ethical foundations Eleanor had built into TechFlow's corporate structure. Gregory Walsh discovered the fatal flaw in Marcus's plan during his review of TechFlow's original partnership agreements and corporate governance documents. Hidden within the dense legal language that few people bothered to read carefully was a provision that Eleanor had insisted upon during the company's incorporation. Any partner or shareholder who engages in criminal misconduct or breach of fiduciary duty automatically forfeits their ownership interest to the remaining honest partners. Gregory read from the original corporate charter. Eleanor Whitman was remarkably prescient about protecting the company against internal corruption. The provision had been activated the moment Marcus began embezzling funds 3 years earlier. Every dollar he had stolen, every document he had forged, and every lie he had told in board meetings constituted criminal misconduct that legally transferred his shares to Eleanor and Robert Sterling. Since Eleanor's shares had already passed to me through the inheritance trust, and Robert maintained his original ownership percentage, Marcus's attempted sale to Apex involved shares he no longer legally owned. The forfeiture provision meant that my ownership had grown from 51% to nearly 80% of the company. Mr. Sterling has been attempting to sell assets that ceased to be his property 3 years ago. Jennifer Adams explained to the emergency board meeting we convened to address his fraudulent negotiations with Apex. His criminal actions automatically triggered the misconduct forfeiture clause that Eleanor included specifically to prevent this kind of corporate sabotage. The revelation destroyed Marcus's final gambit and exposed him to additional federal charges for attempted fraud in the sale of assets he didn't own. Jonathan Webb, when confronted with evidence that Marcus lacked legal authority to sell TechFlow shares, immediately withdrew Apex's interest in the transaction and cooperated fully with federal investigators. We had no knowledge that Mr. Sterling's ownership had been forfeited due to criminal misconduct. Webb stated in a public letter that distanced Apex from any association with Marcus's fraud scheme. Apex Technologies does not engage in transactions involving stolen or fraudulently obtained assets. The final collapse of Marcus's criminal enterprise came with shocking swiftness. Federal agents executed search warrants at his home office and offshore banking facilities simultaneously. His assets were frozen, pending recovery proceedings for the embezzled funds. His passport was confiscated to prevent flight to non-extradition countries. Sandra Hayes faced similar legal consequences as evidence mounted of her active participation in the fraud conspiracy. Her husband William's law firm was suspended from practicing while state bar investigators reviewed their role in creating illegal corporate structures and facilitating money laundering. Thomas Brennan, the private investigator who had helped Marcus create forged documents and false evidence against Eleanor, accepted a plea agreement that required him to testify about the full scope of the conspiracy in exchange for reduced charges. But perhaps most satisfying was watching the expressions on Marcus's face as he realized that his crimes had been discovered, documented, and proven through evidence he couldn't deny or manipulate. The arrogant confidence he had displayed throughout his criminal career evaporated into desperate panic as the consequences of his actions became inescapable. "This is all a misunderstanding," Marcus pleaded during his final board meeting before federal agents escorted him from TechFlow's offices in handcuffs. "I was protecting the company's interests. Eleanor was the one who started these irregular financial arrangements." But his lies carried no weight against the mountain of evidence Eleanor had assembled and the additional proof that continued emerging as investigators expanded their examination of his activities. Bank records, audio recordings, video surveillance, email communications, and witness testimony painted an undeniable picture of systematic fraud and abuse of authority. Robert Sterling's public statement following Marcus's arrest reflected the profound sadness of a father who had lost his son to greed and corruption, but also the determination of a principled businessman committed to rebuilding what had been damaged. "I raised Marcus to understand that integrity is the foundation of lasting success," Robert said in a press conference outside TechFlow's offices. "His choice to betray that principle has brought shame to our family and harm to innocent people who trusted him. But it will not destroy the company that Eleanor and I built through honest work and ethical leadership." The transformation in workplace culture was immediate and remarkable. Employees who had been demoralized by years of manipulation and exploitation suddenly understood that their dedication and talent had been generating legitimate success that Marcus had stolen and hidden. Rather than feeling defeated by the revelation of corporate crime, they felt empowered by the opportunity to rebuild under honest leadership. David Rodriguez summarized the prevailing mood during our first staff meeting following Marcus's arrest. "We've been working for criminals without knowing it, but that doesn't diminish the value of what we've accomplished. Now we can build on that foundation without having our success stolen from us." The Meridian acquisition proceeded on an accelerated timeline with terms that were significantly more favorable than the original agreement. Victoria Chang's team had been impressed by how quickly and decisively we had exposed and eliminated the criminal elements within TechFlow's leadership. "Companies that can identify and remove internal corruption demonstrate exactly the kind of ethical culture Meridian seeks in acquisition targets," Victoria explained. "Your handling of this crisis has increased rather than decreased TechFlow's value proposition." As Marcus was led away in federal custody to await trial on charges that would likely result in a 20-year prison sentence, I felt the profound satisfaction that comes from seeing justice served and truth vindicated. Eleanor's principles had prevailed over corruption. Honest employees had been protected from criminal exploitation. The company's integrity had been restored. But beyond personal vindication, the victory represented something larger and more important. It proved that principled individuals could successfully challenge institutional corruption when they had courage to fight for what was right evidence, to support their claims and allies who shared their commitment to ethical behavior. The final gambit had failed, and justice had triumphed. 6 months later, I sat behind the mahogany desk in what had once been Eleanor's corner office, now officially mine as Chief Executive Officer of TechFlow Industries. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Colorado River, illuminating framed photographs that captured the company's transformation from Marcus's criminal enterprise into the ethical technology leader Eleanor had always envisioned. The acquisition had closed successfully at $400 million, $50 million more than the original offer due to competitive bidding that emerged once Meridian Industries publicized TechFlow's new leadership structure and restored integrity. 3 additional technology companies had submitted acquisition proposals, driving up the final purchase price and validating the value that honest management could create. Marcus Sterling was serving a 22-year federal sentence in a minimum security prison in East Texas. The judge had imposed the maximum penalty available under federal sentencing guidelines, noting that his crimes represented a particularly egregious betrayal of trust that had harmed dozens of innocent employees and damaged Austin's technology community. Every dollar of his embezzled funds had been recovered through asset forfeiture and criminal restitution orders. Sandra Hayes received an 8-year sentence for conspiracy and money laundering, while her husband William lost his law license permanently and faced additional civil liability for professional misconduct. Thomas Brennan accepted a 5-year plea agreement in exchange for his cooperation with federal prosecutors and forfeiture of all assets acquired through his criminal activities. But the true measure of our victory wasn't found in criminal sentences or financial recovery. It was visible in the transformation of TechFlow's workplace culture and the opportunities we had created for people who had been exploited by Marcus's systematic theft and manipulation. Jennifer Adams had helped us implement the most comprehensive employee profit-sharing program in Austin's technology sector. Every person who had worked for TechFlow during Marcus's criminal period received retroactive compensation for the raises and bonuses they had been denied while he stole company resources. Junior developers found themselves with stock option packages that reflected their actual contributions to the company's success. People are working late because they're excited about their projects, not because they're afraid of being fired. Lisa Thompson observed during our quarterly review meeting. The difference in workplace energy is remarkable. Employees feel valued and respected instead of exploited and manipulated. Tom Richardson had been promoted to senior developer with a salary increase of 60% and stock options that would make him wealthy if TechFlow continued its growth trajectory. Jennifer Chen, the accountant who had been driving for rideshare companies to make ends meet, now led our financial planning department with compensation that reflected her advanced degree and professional expertise. I never imagined I could build a career at a company that actually cares about employee welfare, Jennifer told me during her performance review. For the first time in years, I'm planning for long-term financial security instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. David Rodriguez had transformed TechFlow's financial operations to emphasize transparency, accountability, and ethical business practices. Monthly financial reports were distributed to all employees. Board meetings were recorded and summarized for staff review, and executive compensation was tied directly to company performance and employee satisfaction metrics. We've built the most transparent financial culture I've ever encountered in corporate America, David explained to a reporter from Austin Business Weekly. Employees know exactly how their work contributes to company success and how that success translates into personal opportunities. The industry recognition had been overwhelming and gratifying. TechFlow received Austin's Corporate Ethics Award for our response to internal fraud and commitment to honest business practices. Eleanor was posthumously inducted into the Texas Technology Hall of Fame for her contributions to software development and ethical leadership. Even universities began using our fraud detection and response case study as educational material for business and law students. But perhaps most meaningful was the letter I received from Eleanor's sister Rachel, who had initially been swayed by Marcus's lies but later became one of our strongest supporters. Eleanor always talked about building something that would outlast her individual contributions, Rachel wrote. Watching you lead TechFlow according to her principles proves that her legacy is secure in capable hands. She would be proud of how you've honored her memory while making the company even better than she could have imagined. Robert Sterling had remained active as chairman emeritus, providing guidance and wisdom while allowing me complete operational authority. His presence served as a bridge between TechFlow's founding principles and its future aspirations, ensuring continuity while supporting innovation. Leadership isn't inherited through family relationships or corporate titles, Robert reflected during our monthly advisory meeting. True leadership is earned through principled decisions, ethical behavior, and genuine concern for people's welfare. Eleanor recognized those qualities in you, and her judgment has been vindicated completely. The acquisition integration with Meridian Industries had created opportunities that exceeded our most optimistic projections. TechFlow's algorithms were being implemented across Meridian's global client base, generating revenue streams that supported aggressive research and development investment. Our Austin headquarters had expanded to occupy an entire building with plans for additional facilities in Dallas and Houston. Victoria Chang had become both a business partner and personal mentor, sharing insights about scaling technology companies while maintaining ethical culture and employee-focused policies. The technology industry needs more leaders like you, Victoria told me during our latest strategic planning session. Companies that prioritize integrity over short-term profits create sustainable value that benefits everyone involved, from employees to customers to investors. As I reflected on the journey from that shocking moment in the acquisition conference room to this position of restored leadership and vindicated principles, I understood that Eleanor's greatest gift hadn't been the company ownership or financial inheritance. Her greatest gift had been the confidence to stand up against injustice and the knowledge that principled individuals could prevail against corruption when they refused to compromise their values. The morning light continued streaming through the office windows as I reviewed plans for TechFlow's next phase of growth. We were developing artificial intelligence applications that would revolutionize data processing for healthcare organizations. We were creating cybersecurity tools that would protect small businesses from financial fraud. We were building technology solutions that served human needs rather than exploiting human weaknesses. Eleanor's voice seemed to echo through the room as I remembered her final lesson about true power, coming not from position or wealth, but from unwavering integrity and the courage to fight for what was right. She had prepared me not just to inherit a company, but to lead with the same principles that had made TechFlow worth saving. The inheritance was complete, but the mission was just beginning. Before I finish sharing this story with you, I want to ask you something that's been on my mind throughout this entire experience. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you knew something was wrong, but felt powerless to speak up because the corrupt person had more authority or influence than you did? How did you find the courage to take action, or what prevented you from fighting back? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and reminded you that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to compromise their principles, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who fought injustice and won. Share this video with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for what's right in their own life or workplace. Thank you for taking this journey with me and for believing that integrity and courage can triumph over corruption and abuse of power. Remember that you have more strength than you realize, and sometimes the quiet person in the corner is exactly who the world needs to step forward and make things right. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.